I suppose my work is about space defined by bodies. When I say space, I mean infinite space, the space, as it were, between kind of bodies, whether they're planetary or physical, but also the space of consciousness. And what do I mean by the space of consciousness? When you close your eyes, where are you? You are somewhere. It's dark, it's objectless, it is without edge. And I'm interested in that as a physical space. For me, the great power of sculpture is that it is still silent and it endures in time. So you could say sculpture is an instrument for investigating the space-time nature of existence, you could say, human existence. The majority of my work tries to investigate the body as a place rather than as a thing, and insert it into the world in such a way that it perhaps begins to activate a specific place. So it is itself, I think, more of a place than an object, but when you put these objects into a location, whether it's a street or a beach or a mountain, it begins to have I hope, a catalytic effect, that the presence of the object makes you more aware of two things. One, your own experience, your own embodied experience, and makes you look again at the space that you and this object share. The work has very little intrinsic value. It is simply a catalyst for people to look at what is already here. Most of the generation of the work happens here. This is where most of the big projects get evolved and developed. I think it's very important to say that it's the work that guides the work. I used to think that I make the work. I made the work. I used to think that I made the work. I used to think that in a way it was dependent on me. I now think of it as being completely independent. And what we try to do here is listen to what the last work that we've made is trying to tell us and act accordingly. That's the skill, I think, that we collectively share at the studio. The ability to interpret within the language of the works as they evolve what the work is trying to tell us to do next. Nothing is fixed. All of the work, in some senses, is in a state of becoming, and all of it is unique. I use my own life as a kind of test site, you could say that my body is both material, instrument, and subject. I think of that as the truth claim of the work. The work comes, it's not abstract, nor is it representational, it's indexical, it's a trace, it's forensics, it is evidence. This is the trace of a lived moment of a real body in time. I would like to think that they are empty bodies, abstract bodies, without name. And therefore they are of a radically different order to the statue, which is usually about the hero or about the sexualized body. These are bodies that simply stand, that are about being, not doing, that often engage either with the distance, with the horizon, or with some internal world. Yeah, I think that field came out of a kind of crisis. I'd been working for 10 years, working from the body, working from my own body, in my own time, in my own space. Nobody seemed particularly interested. They were very remote and rather melancholic works. And I felt a desperate need to do something that in some way not only connected with other people, but was about collective experience. And I took all the money that we had with me and flew to Mexico. And the first field I made with one family, the Texcas from San Matias, Cholula. And there were about 57 of us altogether, and then maybe up to 60 with Gabriel Orozco, who was my assistant, and me, and Marcela Ramirez, who was an employee of the British Council and who helped with the very first field. So the very first field was made with the British Council, and the concept of the work was, you know, without feeling that you were making a representation, how can you take a basic material like clay, take a handful of it, form it without in a way thinking I am making a body, just form it, give it form by the space between your hands, allow it to stand up, and make it conscious by giving it eyes with the point of a sharpened stick or a pencil. And the extraordinary thing is that after doing that for a day, again, this is very, very meditative. It's a repeated action. At first, you know, they would be nervous and they say, "Is this what you want? Is this all right?" And I say, "Well, it's not about what I want. It's about what you see. You know, do you feel that this is you?" And slowly the penny would drop, that this wasn't about my wanting something from them. It was about them, every collaborator, every maker as part of field, in some senses, finding their own form. And the forms are amazingly varied, and even within one person's production, there are the sleepy ones, the alert ones, the sad ones, the happy ones, the shy ones, the bold ones, etc. The last field I made was the Asian field, which was the largest of all. First field had about 25 tons of clay. The last field had 130 tons of clay. First field was about 35,000 pieces. The last field was 230,000 pieces. We made it in Shanshan village in Huadu. Huadu is just a little way along the Pearl River from Guangzhou. Made it with all the villagers, some of whom were shopkeepers, some of whom were farmers, some were carpenters, some were just housewives. For a Chinese population unfamiliar with contemporary art, I think this was just an opportunity to see themselves in a way. So I think that is the point of field. Field makes you the unwitting subject of the art's gaze rather than the other way around. And we published a whole book of the responses to Asian field because they were so varied. You know, from people suffering loss. The one-child policy has meant that infant mortality in terms of killed children or aborted children is huge. So it brought up those kinds of feelings for some people. For others it was a kind of celebration of the Dragon Kingdom and its great population. For others it was a memory of their time in the army. For others it was an environmental thing. This is the hungry souls that are going to follow us. I'm trying to make an equivalent of us now, of what it feels like to be alive at the beginning of the 21st century, in order to test whether that ambition is working, I have to expose my work across cultures and across the world. And it's absolutely vital. I think this is the ultimate kind of proof of the viability of a work. Can it touch people? Can it make a bridge? Can it make people think differently about where they are and who they are? And it's only by testing, you know, if you just show to your family, you're only going to get back what you already know. If you show to your village, you might get a little bit more back, but it'll still be, as it were, of the parish. I think that you've got to go across the oceans, you've got to go to other continents, you've got to test in a way the viability of your proposal in very, very different language, racial, climatic conditions, and see whether you can communicate. And, you know, in a sense, in a global world, the one thing that can test, in a way, difference and similarity is the cultural experience, and hopefully make it richer by actually, you know, making both cultures aware of the distinctness of their response. So the response to field in China was of a very, very different order to the response to field in Brazil or here in Britain. In the early days, the British Council, you know, I mean, it was just wonderful. I can remember in 1980 doing my first international show at the Milan Triennale, and we, through Henry Merrick Hughes, who was the then officer, we met other artists, we met curators, we were in some way introduced to the culture, and that is the most fantastic legacy. The British Council has the most wonderful reputation globally in the visual arts department. But certainly, I mean, I just think it's been a wonderful thing, and I would hate for it to ever disappear. I keep referring to a wonderful saying of John Cage's. We are encouraged to feel that we are moving towards some sort of goal, but Cage insists we're already at the goal and we are changing with it, and that if art has any value or any purpose whatsoever, it's to open our eyes to that fact. In other words, I'm not interested in expressing myself. I'm not interested in communicating ideas that I might have. I'm interested in making objects that invite you to look again at what is already here, but in an imaginative and interrogative and participatory way.